quickly. Okay, that looks good. Hello everyone, this is the 5th Ethical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul. This is my flock. Today is August 25th, 2013, and we're going to continue our study in the Foreword on page 6.2, section in the Foreword, section 3, paragraph 22. That's where we left off last time. So that's where we're going to start back at. Thank you for joining us. Let's have a short prayer for our video, and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together. Pray that you'll bless these people at home that listen to this also, that they might have a greater understanding of you, and that we might share this knowledge with one another and grow as your servants. And we pray that you'll bless our families and provide our needs. And we thank you, we love you, and we give you the praise. In your Son, in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, last time we stopped off on 321, and we were talking about the theoretical I am right before we left. So let's just pick it up from there. And Dawn, would you like to start reading for us tonight?
As a time-space creature?
In this original transaction.
In this original transaction, the theoretical I am achieved the realization of personality by becoming the eternal Father of the original Son. Simultaneously with becoming the eternal source of the Isle of Paradise, coexistent with the differentiation of the Son from the Father, and in the presence of paradise, there appeared the person of the infinite Spirit in the central universe of Havona. With the appearance of coexistent personal deity, the eternal Son and the infinite Spirit, the Father escaped as a personality from otherwise inevitable diffusion throughout the potential of total deity. Thenceforth, it is only in Trinity association with his two deity equals that the Father fills all deity potential, while increasingly experiential deity is being actualized on the divinity levels of supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness.
Is that not a mouthful?
Oh my gosh. I need to camp out here for a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, let's kind of break this down. The transaction of the theoretical I am. We all know what the I am is, right? It's the original concept of first source and center, the Father. Okay? Before he was the Father, right? That's the concept of the I am. The I am fills everything. Okay? And it says, before the realization of becoming the Father, okay, the original Son simultaneously with becoming the eternal source of paradise, coexistent with the differentiation of the Son from the Father. So what does that mean? Think about that. That means the Father divided himself, didn't he? You know, just like he gives us a Father fragment, the Father divided himself and created what? The Son. So immediately he becomes the Son of the Father. Now, an interesting point about that is what? The Son, being a division of the Father, becomes what? Equal to the Father. Part of the Trinity, right?
But with different roles, no?
With different roles, that's right. And at the exact same instant, what happens flashes to existence? Paradise. Now, why does paradise flash into existence when the Son was created? It needed a location, right, for the Son and what was to come, right? Because before that point, there was no location needed because the theoretical I am needed nothing, did he? He was the source of all things. But since he had a Son, since he had a personality other than himself, then he needed a dwelling place for that personality, didn't he? So that differentiation they're talking about is him splitting himself. Now, the interesting part of this, it goes on to say, and in the presence of paradise there appeared the person of infinite Spirit and the central universe of Havona. So what does that tell us? That means this, that part of the Son and part of the Father, they differentiated themselves also, didn't they? So part of the Father and part of the Son split apart and became what? The infinite spirit. Now at that exact same instance, what else happened? Havona appeared. Why did Havona appear? Because part of the job of the infinite spirit is to control mind and matter. And how could she control mind and matter if there was no matter to control, right? So what happened? Havona appeared with all its billion worlds. Now we're not talking about just our little planet and the little Loki universe. We're talking a billion years flashed into existence at one time, right? Okay, so that's a good way to look at it. Is first the Father splits himself, it creates the Son, then together they both split themselves and create the infinite spirit. Now what does make that make the infinite spirit? It makes the infinite spirit equal to whom? Both of them, right? So that's where you get the Trinity from, right? Hard concept, but if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. It's got a part of the Father, the infinite spirit does. It's got a part of the Son. So would they always be inseparable? Yes. They're that unit together, aren't they? They function always as a unit, but they're separate personalities, because at that point when the infinite spirit split apart from the Father and the Son, what did the Father do? He granted personality to the infinite spirit, right? That's why they call it flashing into existence, right?
Another observation is that the Isle of Paradise, in the way they explain it, came before the
Havona.
and the spirit.
Yes.
So we talked a bit about that, but there must be some significance about that I actually forgot.
There is some significance to that. Number one is, we remember from studying that the Isle of Paradise is the source and center for what? All gravity, right? And all circuits. So the infinite spirit immediately becomes part, inseparable from what? The Father, Son, and Paradise. Because she is part of the controlling factor of all matter, isn't she? And at that same time, Havona was created. But really, if you think about it, Havona is the domain of what? The infinite spirit, isn't it? You have to think about it.
But not Paradise. I mean, Paradise.
Well, she is, yeah, Paradise too, but she was not the original of Paradise. She was an additive to Paradise. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a sense. Now,
The question is why. But
yeah, the
I
question
don't know, I
is
think
what?
this says coexistent.
Coexistent,
Seems to me
but-
that it happened all at
All at
once.
once.
Yes.
That there wasn't the Father and the Son and they split and then added the infinite
Well, that's the way they
spirit.
explain it to
Well,
us.
no, not really, because it says
Yeah,
simultaneously becoming the eternal
simultaneously.
Son of the Isle of Paradise,
Right.
coexistent with
Right.
the differentiation from the Son.
But
from
it's
the
still
Father.
proper to think that the Son came first. The Son was the
It's all
the
together,
first. Yeah, you can,
simultaneously.
yeah, you can
coexistent,
think of
all
it that way.
three.
If that's easier for you to think of it that way.
It's,
I think that's what it
it's in the
says.
eternal past. So it's not only, it actually never happened in a way, right?
Well, yeah,
That's
sure.
right.
It has
In
always
essence,
been. You know,
It
so-
always
It's
has
always
been.
been.
So
Uh,
they explain this to us so we have a sequence of events so we can understand.
right, but
Yeah.
it's still the way they explain it. The Isle of Paradise comes from the Father and the Son. It doesn't come
Yeah.
from the Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Yeah.
That's what they say in terms
Coexistent.
of not. They explain in terms of time, but in terms of time, we know that it is just for our way of thinking. It didn't happen that way. It never happened. It has always been. But it's there is still
A
cause
connection.
consequence
Yeah.
kind of connections, if we can say, with something that never happened because it has always been
Yeah.
between the Father, the Son,
And Paradise.
and Paradise. And then, or then not in terms of time, but in terms of causation relationship, the
Havona,
Spirit
yeah.
is the result of the Father and the Son.
But look at the next line. With the appearance of coexistent personal deity, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit,
They're
the Father
coexistent.
escaped.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So, I don't think we should put the eternal Son before the infinite Spirit. It all happened at
Well, it
once.
really doesn't matter because they're all existential.
No,
but
but-
this is more of a way for us to understand it
Right.
than anything.
Yeah. It's-
Right? Yeah.
Coexistent.
Who knows what well, maybe we'll find out in more details.
We-
when
yeah, we
through the
do
papers
later
what
on
is
in-
that significance.
When we study each one, it breaks it down a little bit more.
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah.
Why does it say achieved the realization of personality by becoming the eternal Father of the original Son?
Because before the the separation of the Father and the Son, there was no personality other than the Father, the theoretical I am. That's why they keep coming back to this theoretical I am.
And that's why it's theoretical, because
Yeah.
it has never been that. It has always been
It's
as
always
a Trinity.
been
right?
as a Trinity. But by splitting himself off and creating the Son, then immediately he has to do what? He has to grant personality to something other than himself. Because it goes on to say here near the end, okay, near the end of this, that by doing this, he, where is it here?
By why?
Escaped, wait a minute, the Father escaped as a personality from otherwise inevitable diffusion throughout the potential of total deity. What does that tell us? That means if he had not done this, then his personality would have been diffused through everything, right? Then we'd be talking about what? Pantheism, right? Because God would be everything. But by doing this, he creates three personalities, doesn't he? He creates his own personality, he creates the Son's personality, and he creates the Spirit's personality by this differentiation.
What I'm also inferring from this, though, is that there's a relational piece to this. When the split happened, he had to have others to relate to and to relate back to him.
Yeah.
To create that unity.
Yeah, yeah. But remember, they keep saying this is a theoretical thing, right? Because they always have been, always will be. So, we can't hang our hat too much on it. It's just a great way to explain it. Especially if you have to explain it to like a child. Where'd God come from? Where'd the Son come from? Well, we know the Son is a derivative from God. We just don't, it tells us that they always have been that way, right? You tell a child that, they go, I don't understand.
But some people in some religions get very upset with the mere mention of the word Trinity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I've had trouble going to shut the book.
Yeah,
The word Trinity up.
Yeah,
Can't
for
be
some,
true.
I remember talking to someone, he said, and when I mentioned your answer book and we talked, he said, he asked specifically, is there the concept in Trinity in your answer book? I said, yeah. He said, okay, that comes from evil. So, but
Comes from evil?
It comes from the evil. Right. So associating the concept of Trinity for this person who was a fundamental Christian
Yes.
was, therefore it's evil.
This was a fundamental Christian that teaches
Yes.
this?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So I thought it was the Jewish
Jehovah's
people still
Witnesses
believe
do.
that.
So-
that there's no.
It's a bit on the
That
side.
I haven't heard.
uh,
That's
no
news to me.
Trinity.
So the side question, okay, well, so I guess we shouldn't debate that too long now, but as a parenthesis, there would be a question for me, why a fundamental Christian would believe that, from what kind of source would that come from?
Well, and they would really freak out then probably if you start talking about the seven absolutes then, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Because really it's an extension. You have three basic
That would be
absolutes.
blasphemy.
Yeah, and
And
you have four additional sub-absolutes.
And I was literally not even condemned to hell, I was already dead in the eyes of someone I talked to,
Yeah.
because I didn't believe in spiritually dead. From God's perspective, of course he was capable of saying that, and just because I didn't believe and adhere to the concept of atonement.
Well, that's the epitome to me of arrogance. When you assume you know everything.
And the, well,
And
and the rigidity.
the rigidity
In this
of-
case, I don't
yeah.
think it was arrogance. It was the rigidity of
Mhm.
sticking. The Bible is the Word of God, and all over the place. This
Well, that's
means-
funny because in the
and
Bible
that's
it mentions the Trinity several places. So that's what's surprising to me that they would take that position.
Yeah.
Well, they pick out what they want to study in the
Oh,
Bible.
yeah.
It's like they don't mention about the
Yeah.
land of Nod too much.
Well, we do this as your ancients too. I mean, we really do. We pick and choose what we want to hang our hats on and what we don't want to hang our hats on.
Well, yeah,
and
we're not going to mention everything because people look at us like, what?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's keep going on. Then it goes on to say, thenceforth it is only the Trinity association with his two deity equals. Did y'all catch that?
Yeah.
There's two deity equals, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, right? That the Father fills all deity potential. Did you see that? All deity potential. So if he never created another sharing part of himself of deity, all deity was already fulfilled, hasn't it? Then in that Trinity. But he doesn't stop there.
But I think the way we interpret that is that, meaning that without being in association with the other two, he doesn't. And
That's
that's
right.
the escape of being the whole everything, being
Yeah,
everything,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's his escape from isolation, right? Okay. All right, and then it goes on to say, while increasing experiential deity is being actualized on the divinity levels of supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness. Now, how is that? That's through the supreme being, right? The experiential part. And then it goes on to the almighty supreme, and eventually to the ultimate, right? And that's what they're talking about here. So he goes from being total deity of everything, already experienced everything, knows everything, sees everything, as existential, always has been, always will be, sees things from the beginning to the end, to what? Opening himself up to deity experiential relationships. Okay? Now what does that mean? That means he's trying to share his position and himself of deity with his children. Does that make sense? All the way down to whom? Us. And how does he do it through us? The adjuster, the thought adjuster, right? That father fragment. So he goes from being an isolated, totally self-sufficient deity by doing these things and allowing the experiential part to come in, to allowing all of us to become what? Co-creators. Does that make sense? Not only the creator sons, not only the creative mother spirits, but all beings with father fragments become part of the creative process. Because we create what? We create experiences which adds to the supreme. Make sense? Okay? And that's the way it works. So let's
But isn't it true to say that before all that happened, experience, the God had not experienced everything there was to experience. He had the potential of all that, but it was not actualized.
Well, you can't have both, Jill. What I'm saying is this. If you believe the Father and the Son and Spirit are existential, always have been, always will be, and they're omnipotent, you know, they have this knowledge of what's going to happen, what has happened, and what will happen, okay? They already know what's happened, but the experience they don't know is the experience of the children.
Well, I'm not sure we know that they know what happened, because
We
the Father...
We only have to take that on faith because there's no way to know for sure, you know. And the other thing is this: if you think of omniscient and omnipotent God, if all three, that means He knows all, sees all, knows what's coming, knows what's been, always will know what's coming and what's been. But that does not take away from our ability to have free will to make decisions. And that's the part of the experiential thing. And that's part of the creation in our universes and the universes to come that allows us to take part in divinity. Without that allowing us to take part in that creative divinity, what would we have? We would not have free will anymore, would we? Because we have to make a choice to do these things. We have to make a choice of survival. We have to make a choice of fusing with our adjuster. So by giving us that choice and that free will, we become what? We choose divinity or we choose not divinity. Now what happens if we choose not divinity? Then we cease to exist eventually, right? Can't have both, right?
You know, I was reading this week and it says that there's only two kinds of people. The people who choose to do the will of God and the people who don't. In the eyes of the deities,
Yeah.
those are the only two kinds of people there are.
Especially the ancients of days, you know? I mean, could you imagine having that position? They have to take a position of, if a being chooses not to follow the will of God, they really have to divorce themselves from them, don't they? Because could you imagine having to make a permanent decision to take the life out of someone, to take the life force out of them? What a horrible job that would be. But they don't have to make that choice, really, do they? Because we all make that own choice for ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They just
But they
sanction.
really want us to
Sanction.
survive, so
Yeah.
they give
Yeah.
challenges to people to help them to choose correctly.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Some people
They
don't
give-
turn to God unless the
Yeah, but they give
stuff
you,
is hit the fan.
you know, it reminds me of something I read once before in the Urantia book. It talks about the mercy credits of life, you know. the mercy credits that God gives you is well above every decision you could ever make in your life. You know, so there's adequate mercy to allow you to make the proper decision. The question is, once you pass into that realm of sin and iniquity, when do you become cosmic insane? When you cosmically cannot make a decision any longer that you would survive. And that's when you pass into cosmic insanity. So if that's the case, why would anybody want you to survive? Because you don't want to be around these evil beings the rest of eternity, right? So it's, you know, it's a justice thing. It really is. But we have adequate mercy if we ever turn to God, especially in this lifetime. You know, we have a lot of things that go on in this lifetime that doesn't seem to be justice. It doesn't seem to be equal to people, and a lot of different things. But we don't see the whole picture, do we? We only see the physical part. You know, we don't see the overall picture. It's kind of like that song, "From a Distance." You know, God sees. I don't like that song because I think it should be from within us, because it's the adjuster that sees this. But God sees the overall picture of all beings and how this affects everyone. And we have a tendency to say, how does this affect me? It's not me that we have to be concerned about. It's how it affects everyone else, right? We're a family. And if one part of your family is causing discontent and evil and problems and that sort of thing, it affects the whole family. It just doesn't affect that one person. So that's where this comes in. It's a big part of it anyway. Okay, let's keep going. Lenny, you want to take the next? Oh, wait a minute, I'm skipping over Rodney already. Rodney, turn on your mic and take the next section. If he's out there. Rodney? Turn on your mic, we can't hear you.
Looks like it's frozen.
He's frozen, we may have lost him. You want to take the next one, Linda?
Sure. The concept of the I Am is a philosophic concession which we make to the time-bound, space-fettered mind of man, to the impossibility of creature comprehension of eternity existences, non-beginning, non-ending realities and relationships. To the time-space creature, all things must have a beginning, save only the one uncaused, the primeval cause of causes. Therefore, do we conceptualize this philosophic value level as the I Am, at the same time instructing all creatures that the eternal Son and the infinite Spirit are co-eternal with the I Am. In other words, that there never was a time when the I Am was not the Father of the Son and with him of the Spirit.
Okay, so there it comes back to that, the existential part of the Trinity, doesn't it? But there never has been a time when the Father was not the Father of the Son and with him of the Spirit, right? So these are concepts for RP brains more than anything else, right? All right, let's keep going. We don't want to get bogged down too much here. Where's my Pam, you want to take the next one?
Mm-hmm. The infinite is used to denote the fullness, the finality implied by the primacy of the first source and center. The theoretical I Am is a creature level representing the eternity intention of the true infinity of the absolute and unfettered free will of the universal Father. This concept is sometimes designated the Father infinite.
So really this allows the free will of the Father to extend himself, doesn't it? What it boils down to, you know, this whole concept. And we always come back to this. This is interesting. They always call it the theoretical I Am. Because, why did they call it the theoretical? Because they really don't ever separate the Trinity, do they? They're always there together. Okay, so, and that's about all I want to say about that. Let's keep going. All kinds of issues here today. Okay. This is the next thing I want to discuss. This is a slide I pulled from the Encyclopedia Urantia, Okay, there's 3 of them in order. And I just want to touch on these things because I think these are interesting concepts, especially if you're a mathematician and you have problems with this whole concept of your branch book and that sort of thing. So this kind of puts it in perspective. If you read this slide, it says what? 2 notions of infinity denoted by this sign. You see that? The sign for infinity?
Mm.
It's up here and it's over here. You see that? Okay, are often used in mathematics to indicate the immeasurability, large quantity, right? Some numbers or quantities are counterably infinite. For instance, the set of all positive integers is counterably infinite at any point in the counting process. The counter knows what the next number or successor is. Okay, so if you look up here, you start at 0, right? And you can start at 1 and keep adding 1 and go out to infinity, okay? You can do the same thing the opposite direction, right? Just keep adding 1 over and over and over and over again. Now, how does time work? It works the same way, doesn't it? Okay? We have a succession of events. We take it from one point. You can go out to the future indefinitely. You can go into the past indefinitely from memory, right? At least God the Father can. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Okay, the total number of all real numbers in the closed interval 0 to 1 is uncountably infinite. Now we're talking about the space between 0 and 1, aren't we? All right? However, many numbers are numbers one counted. The counter does not know what the next number is. They are uncountably infinite. Even the gods can't count them all. In other words, as long as you keep going one direction, you can always add another over and over and over and over and over and over and over. There's no stop to adding, right?
My mathematical teacher has a very good way to express that. He said, if you take all the rational numbers, right, so which is infinity, is the ratio of any integers, right?
Yeah.
And you put them on this line, and then you throw water on top of it,
Yeah.
you get the shower.
Yeah.
Because everything else is even much more. Right?
Yeah.
So it's as if there was nothing. And
That's
a
right.
rational number between 0 and 1,
Yeah.
there are a lot of them.
There's a
Infinite.
lot of them, right? And the space between these is what? Is divided, divisibly indefinitely, can it? So if you think about it, the space between 0 and 1, you can divide it forever on end, right? Indefinite. So if you think about it, this section between 0 and 1 represents what?
Infinity.
Infinity. Because you can infinitely divide it, can't you? Forever and ever and ever. You can never get to the point where you cannot divide it, right? You'll have point, such and such and such and such, right? So if you think about it that way, okay, that this one integer is divided to infinity, what if you add this same section zillions and zillions of times? Think about the divisibility of that, right? It's unlimited. And that's why this concept of infinity is so important. Now let's go on one more. Okay? In the Urantia book, the infinite is not used to denote quantity. Do you see that? It's not quantity, it's not a number, right? But quality of the state of fullness. Does that make sense to y'all? So we're not talking about a number of chunks of something. It's the quality within those chunks of something. Okay? And if you think about it that way, our local universes, just the 7 super universes, is almost infinite within themselves. You think about it. Because the quality within that chunk of space is only related to your living space, right? So if we took this Earth and we look at the microscopic world, in our own world, is it not divisible like this also?
No, there is an end.
Huh?
There is an end.
There is an end. But who determines that end? The Father does, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He could expand it at any time.
Well,
he?
but that's the reason for
Well-
why we are finite. We are not an infinite world. We are
That's
finite.
right. That's right. Now, when we get to be absintite, is that still the same?
It's probably more divisible, right?
It's probably even more divisible.
And even more on the absolute.
And even more on the absolute. You got the concept. See? That's what we're talking about here.
Well, the
Right.
funny thing is that in my personal experience, things happen in terms of my choices. I mean, if you remember what I described, at the time I was studying those things in math. And I was relating, those things were going on in my mind, the math concept, and actually the concept of becoming perfect, it's a forever concept. It's
Yeah.
like an eternal goal.
Yeah.
I studied that when I studied the asymptotic effect in math, where basically you reach and you get closer and closer, and you never reach it ever.
Yeah, yeah.
You reach it at the infinity point.
Well, and we always talk about the laws of God, don't we? And the laws of mathematics, the laws of science, and who determines those laws? The Father does, right? We can come up with certain variables that we think are always true, but they may not actually be always true. Some people have, I had a guy this weekend tell me he had a problem with the concept in the Urantia book in paper 11 with anti-gravity. And what I was trying to explain to him, it may not be the concept that's the problem, it may be your perception of the concept that's the problem, right? Our understanding of things may not be wide enough to even be able to understand certain things. Well, let's go through this, and this is kind of interesting. The fullness can be represented by a number between 0 and 1, the interval, okay? And this is just one number, okay? If 3 persons are totally disunited, such state can be represented by 0. You see this down here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If 3 persons are totally united in perfect harmony, that state could be represented by 1, or any number between 0 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 indicates some degree of harmony, but not complete harmony. So if we take 0 and we take 1, somewhere in between here, this is no harmony at all, would it be?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But as we go closer to God, we get closer to what? Or closer to 1 anyway, right? Well, we have total harmony. So you can have an association of almost no harmony or total harmony, right? And that's what this 0 to 1, it works just like the number, the infinite possibilities within that number. Our personalities could fit in this integer, couldn't it? Because we all vary in different understanding. We all vary in different degrees of God oneness, right? Or our search for God. So all of us could be anywhere from down here to all the way up there, couldn't we? If we get up to here, what do you think we are? We're fused, aren't we? We're one with God. A one-to-one relationship, right? That could almost
In
be
this plane, in our finite plane.
in a finite plane, right?
So Jesus would be a good example of that.
Jesus would be closer to what? This, right?
The human Jesus, yes.
The human
when,
Jesus.
when he was here.
When he was here.
But this
Right.
one, I would say, at least in my interpretation of that, that would still be on the integer side, right?
That's right.
Or the rational side.
The rational side. This is, there is no out here, is there? Because that's when you reach God. What happens when you get out there? You're a finaliter, aren't you? Because
You're a spirit being.
you're a spirit being. You've met God. You're on God's pathway. Your will is what? God's will, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so let's go on. Likewise, to indicate the power of a person, 0, which refers to 0 power. Okay, this is how we start. And this is on the power plane. You see that? Okay.
What does power mean?
Power's got several definitions. We can have spiritual power. We can have energy power. There's a lot of different things. But I think what they're talking about here is spiritual power. Okay.
Yeah, omnipotence.
Omnipotence and sovereignty, right? Who is the most powerful being that we know of that's been a human? Jesus, right? He's our sovereign. He's earned that right through his through his bestowals, has he not? Okay? And we're going to go through a slide today and this afternoon's, which is going to bring this all so close together, because we're going to look at the 7 absolutes. I believe it's this afternoon. I think I stuck it in this one too. Compared to the power absolutes, okay? And this is going to be a lot clearer when we do this, okay? So let's go on. Likewise, the indication of power of a person. 0 refers to 0 power, whereas 1 refers to the state of all-powerful or omnipotence. That's God, right? Any number between 0 and 1, say 0.1, indicates that the person has some non-zero limited power, but is not all powerful. You see that? So where do we start at? We start out here at almost zero at birth, don't we? We have no power. Okay? We have no say of anything. We start out as a helpless babe. That's what Jesus did. That's his experiential part of what he did. Okay? So he starts out as a helpless babe. He is the creator of the universe. Does he actually have power? Yes. Because why? When he started here, he already was the creator son, was he? You don't take that away because he starts as an helpless babe. But does he realize that power? No. He has no self-realization at birth that he's the creator son. Now, as he went through his life, he did what? His power realization increased from day to day, right? Through his life. Because as he got closer and closer and closer to what? His point of thought adjuster fusion, his power increased, didn't it? Because he had more and more of the realization of who he truly was. Okay? So that's a good example. But we start out here, and when we get through life, what do we get? We don't even hardly get off this line, do we? You know? And that's the problem with life. We don't have any power, and we'd like to have some, right?
But Roger, we can be part of something much bigger.
Yes, we
Even though
can.
we don't have power, we do, because of our free will choice, we can be part of something, and we are, if we choose to do the will of God.
I was going to ask you, well, how do you think you gain that power?
Right, by doing the will of
By
God.
doing the
You
will
can be
of
part
God.
of something much, much bigger.
That's right. That's
All
right.
of us.
That's perfectly right. Now, but most of us stay down here, don't we? Okay? Because why? We never get it in our head that it's the will of God that's important, not our own will.
I think that's why Jesus went off into the wilderness so often, to be alone with God,
That's
because
right.
that's where he was able to deal with that new understanding of who he really
He
was.
took him. Remember, Rodin said, "What does your master do?" He goes out and gains power by what?
Connecting with the
Meditating
Father.
and communicating with God the Father, right? And what do? We give out our power by sitting here and spend it on the things we're doing, don't we? So Jesus was drawing in spiritual power when he did that. And what do? We exude this spiritual power. Now, how can we gain that back? There's two ways we can gain that back. We can do the will of God constantly, right? Not my will but your will, or my will that your will be done, right? And what's the other? Meditation and prayer, right? All right, so let's go on. Regarding the time-space presence of a person, zero means he does not exist anywhere. You see that?
Wow.
We start at non-existence, don't we? Okay? But one indicates everywhereness. All finite beings can be represented by a number x. 0 divided by x is less than x or less than 1, which indicates they have time-space presence for a while somewhere, but disappears subsequently. Thus, if the power and time-space presence of a person is represented by the xy, right, coordinate, 0, 0 denotes a non-existent person. You see that?
Yeah.
And 1, 1 indicates an infinite personality, refers to any finite being if 0 is less than x and less than 1, and 0 is less than y and less than 1. So, how do we gain existence? Right there. By finding God. Our existence is predicated on one thing. God the Father. All this other stuff is what? Not important, is it? Really?
Well, what we do, we cannot sin in prayer, meditation all the
No.
time. That's part of the experienced life to be
That's right.
confronted, right?
But how do you add to the experiential life of God? You do His will, right?
Yes.
Right.
So all these things we do, how do you put meaning in them? You do the will of God, right? So your relationship with your family, okay? How do you gain God's acceptance in that? You do the will of God in your family, right? How about your friends? You do the will of God with your friends. How about work? You do the will of God at work. Everything is that way, everything. That adds to your experience as what? A loving, giving person, doesn't it? It adds to God's experience by what? Sharing with your fellow human beings, right? And you go from 0 power to 1 power with God, right?
So, Roger, if I'm understanding this right, if you continue to do the will of God, what you're essentially doing is gaining a broader and broader and broader perspective, because you are continually trying to approach that everywhere-ness that it says right there.
That's right.
So you have a much broader perspective.
That's right. Because if you
Instead
don't,
of
you're non-existent, right?
Being in your own little,
That's right.
self-absorbed, little space that you're in.
Okay, so, something Jill just said just a minute ago. If you sit at home and you do nothing but think about God, is that God's will?
No.
No. What
Yeah,
is Jesus?
Go out there and do something.
It's about service. That's right. It's all about service. So if you become a hermit and you lock yourself away and you pray 24 hours a day and you don't talk to anybody, you don't do anything, you don't ever serve your fellow man, are you gaining anything from this line? Zilch.
Well, no, because you're contemplating God and
You're
you're
contemplating
magnifying
God.
yourself.
But how is that benefiting God?
The experiential part is missing.
That's the experiential part.
One more
Isn't it?
person focused on the Creator.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, in this
Everything has
world,
to do
this,
with balance, too.
everybody's,
balanced.
oh, well, it's got to be balanced. But
Yeah.
I don't think you can say that they didn't gain anything. They just didn't help anybody
They
else.
gain something for themselves, but they gain nothing for the universe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You think about it. God doesn't need us to do this, does He?
No.
He wants us to worship Him because we love Him,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He only gains things from us from what? Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And by experience, the Supreme grows, right? So He gains through the Supreme. You know, if you get this concept of the Supreme, you see why the Creator Son was so bent
Mm-hmm.
on us helping our fellows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's all He talked about is
Wanted
the
to
Father and
augment
help
the
each other.
Supreme.
Yeah, you want to increase the Supreme. By increasing the Supreme, see, He had it to start out with. He knew He was a Creator Son. He knew He created everything in our local universe. He is our concept of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The problem comes in is if He kept all that to Himself, He would not be increasing the experience of the Supreme either, is He? So is He doing the will of God? No, because it's the will of God that the Supreme grows. And through the growth of the Supreme, we get closer to what? Light and life. And when we reach light and life, what have we reached? A certain amount of perfection. Okay? And what does that mean we've done? We've fulfilled that charge from God to do what? Be ye perfect, even as I am perfect. Right? So it's through that experience we get closer and closer to perfection. Right? So how do you help one? How do you gain a closer concept of perfection? Help one another. Serving. It's all about service, isn't it? Serving. Not self, everyone else. Right?
I would add intelligent cooperation, because
Intelligent.
service has the meaning of you give someone and you give, or a group or whatever, but you give. I think part of that experience when you work with other people who do serve, you serve together, and in
Yeah.
serving together as the concept of cooperation together, which in by itself brings some number of problems, that by being focused on the will of God, by trying to do the will of God, resolving those problems, well, that's part of the...
And what do you gain from it? You gain spiritual joy, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You gain the fruits of the Spirit, right? So it's not just about, when we're talking about serving, it's not always giving to everyone else. You get something back, constantly.
The conflict and the rub comes in when you are in association with people who are not trying to do what you're doing.
That's right.
That's where the rub comes in.
That's where it's, and the other thing is too, we always have to remember moderation in everything.
Right.
We have to be balanced people, and that's hard to do. You can get your mind so far into doing the will of God that you forget we're all human too. We all have human frailties. We all have things that rub us the wrong way and where none of us are perfect and that sort of thing, you're going to yell at somebody that pulls out in front of you occasionally, you know. I mean, you'd like to think I will never get upset at that stupid driver in front of me again, but that's not going to happen, right? Because we're human beings. We have to allow ourselves a certain amount of leeway, as they say. So it's everything in moderation. Let's keep going here. I don't want to get too bogged down on here.
That was really interesting.
Y'all enjoy that? Was that worth going through?
Yeah.
Okay, I got a tip of the month up here.
What I find very interesting is that 0 to 1 interval being finite in the eyes of, you go from 0 to 1 is finite,
Yeah.
but you represent the infinity. So I see the analogy with the center of paradise, where the dwelling place of the gods, where it seems to be that concentric circle being smaller and smaller and smaller, but actually in quality inside, it's actually infinite. Whereas our bigger apparent place on these external circles, they seem bigger in size, but they are not, because from point to point, there
Less
may
quality, right?
Right. Well, the point it's finite, meaning between 2 points at some point you can divide at some point where between 2 points there is nothing.
Yeah.
And because you can go discretely from one point to the next. And I wouldn't. The next statement is not something I can say with assurance, but I suspect that from the concept of time that we have is the same, meaning that at some point time seems to be continuous to us, right?
Yeah.
Between 2 instants of time, you can find infinite number of instants of times.
Yeah.
At the time I was thinking about all those things, and I conjectured that at some point time was actually finite, meaning that there are at some point two instances. There is nothing in between from our perspective of time, which is purely theoretical, and I cannot guarantee that that's a fact of truth, right?
Yeah.
But from that perspective, it's big, but it is finite. There are plenty of holes in between.
Yeah.
Whereas God is filling all those holes
Right.
at that absolute level.
And our finite concept of time really is just when you look at the whole super universe, it's really just a way to track a sequence of events. That's all it is, right? And if you think about it that way, you can almost say time doesn't exist, because really all it is a tracking system to keep track of what's going on. Now, if you believe that, then you believe you can't travel in time because of what? Because you can't go back in a sequence of events, at least we can't, okay? So to God, He knows the beginning to the end, right? There is no time. But to us, there is a sequence of events. So if you could physically transport yourself back in time, like a timeline, right? It's an interesting concept, but I think it's got an error in the fact that those sequence of events have already happened. It's just a way to keep track of them. You see what I'm saying? So I don't believe no one will ever be able to travel time. We've been trying to figure this out for years and years and years, travel through time. Now we can travel through space and get to a point quicker, can't we? We figured out how to do that. That's not time travel, though, if you think about it. That's just being able to go from point A to point B in a different time sequence, right? So it's an interesting stuff. Let's keep going on this here for a minute. There are two opposite concepts of finiteness, okay? This is finite down here. See this? Time, space, limited, super universe level. This is our level, okay? The qualitative opposite word of finite is infinite or unlimited. The attributively opposite word of finite is absolute, as shown below. This is absolute up here, right? Timeless, spaceless. That's paradise. The absolute level is beginningless, endless, timeless, and spaceless. For example, on paradise, time and space are non-existent. Do y'all see that? Okay. The time-space status of paradise is absolute. In other words, it stays the same regardless of what else happens, right? Non-changing. Okay? This level is Trinity attained existentially by the paradise deities, but this third level of unifying deity expression is not fully unified experientially. That's where the Supreme comes in, okay? Whenever, wherever, and however the absolute level of deity functions, paradise absolute values and meanings are manifest. The Isle of Paradise is absolute, although its dimension is finite. You see up here where it says timeless and spaceless? That does not mean it does not have a location, right? Spaceless does not mean it does not have a border, okay? The dimension, you see right here, is finite. In other words, paradise is the largest aggregation of matter in all the super universe, the grand universe, the master universe, everything, okay? But it's got dimensions, a finite dimension, right? But it's still timeless and spaceless. Now, Absonite is the level in between. We know that Absonite is what? The Havona level, okay? That is time-space transcendent. You see that? This is the Havona level. So it's not finite, it's not absolute, is it? It's Absonite. It's in between. It goes into the borders of paradise. It goes into the borders of the finite, doesn't it? It overlaps. That's why we go from the finite to the Absonite and Havona and then to the absolute.
Hey, Roger,
Yeah.
what slide is this? Slide number?
66. Oh, Rodney,
Yeah.
these were probably added after a little bit later than these were finished. So you might have to download the new version to get these slides. I'm not sure when I added them. I may have added them afterwards, after I got it all compiled. So, but it'd be out there on the website, okay?
All right.
For the forward, okay? So let's keep going. Did that help a little bit on this? I know that's a little bit of a side jump there. Okay, let's go back to 325. Jill, would you take it up from there?
Much of the confusion of all orders of beings, high and low, in their efforts to discover the Father Infinite, is inherent in their limitations of comprehension. The absolute primacy of the universal Father is not apparent on sub-infinite levels. Therefore, it is probable that only the Eternal Son and the Infinite Spirit truly know the Father as an infinity. To all other personality, such a concept represents the exercise of faith.
Okay,
Well, we're not alone, eh?
we're not alone. That's right. Let me restart the video back here and we'll keep going. Think about it this way. Hang on, give me 1 second. Okay. So all orders of beings, both high and low. Do you see that? Try to discover the Father infinite. Okay, and there's limitations according to their comprehension. So think about all the other super universes. They're multiple different levels, aren't they? Some people grow up on a planet of light and life, don't they? Because they've already reached that. So their comprehension of these kind of concepts is going to be much greater than ours is because of their training, right, from small beings. And so their understanding of this infinite, finite and infinite, and all that is going to be greater, but none of them will be at the level of total comprehension of infinity except whom? The Eternal Son and the Infinite Spirit. And why is that? Because they experience it with God the Father, don't they? There comes that experiential part of it. You know, you can say you understand it and you comprehend it to a certain. It's just like that square. You might be somewhere within that square, but you're not going to be 100% unless what? You're the eternal Son or infinite Spirit.
So it means that even the paradise,
Even the paradise citizens don't
citizens
comprehend.
don't fully comprehend.
That's right. That's right.
That's mind-boggling.
That is mind-boggling if you think about it. It depends on where we are, right? Let's keep going. I think I skipped over Rodney. Let me get Rodney. Rodney, you want to take the next one?
I sure will.
Universe reality?
Being if my computer's not stuck. Number 4, universe reality.
Yeah.
Okay, reality, listen to light here. Reality differentially actualizes on diverse universe levels. Reality originates in and by the infinite volition of the Universal Father and is realizable in 3 primal phases of many different levels of universe actualization.
And they're going to list some of those levels, but before we go on to do that, I do want to bring this out here. Notice it says here the infinite volition. Do y'all know what that is?
Infinite will.
Infinite will of the Father, right? The volition is the will of the Father.
Yeah, but what does it mean to be infinite? Is it just a qualification of the will of the universe? No matter what he does, what he thinks, what his decision, they're always infinite?
It's
Or-
always infinite, that's right, because he's one of the 3 personalities that sees it from beginning to end in between every direction, right? That's why it's infinite. Now, when is the will or the concept of the universal, of the eternal Son, the infinite Spirit the same way? Yes, why? Because they're existential just like the Father, right? So it's part of the Trinity, okay? And we're going to go over these 3 levels in just a second here, but I do want to say one thing, and that is reality itself. You see this? Reality differentially actualizes. That's a big statement right there.
Sure is.
That means that the reality we see it may be different in every universe, doesn't it? Our concept of reality is going to morph and change as we go up through the super universes, isn't it? Because our concept of reality is what? This physical world, right? To God the Father, this physical world's the farthest from Him, isn't it? The finite. When we go to the mansion worlds, our reality actualizes differently, doesn't it? Because we'll be on a different level, right? You remember we talked a little bit about, I don't know if it was at one of these meetings or up at the Heart of the Mountains this week. I think it was at the Heart of the Mountains, that different beings can visualize different beings on different levels, right? And when this book was being revealed to us, some of the beings that revealed this book said, I can visualize the beings here with me. I cannot visualize the building that we're standing in. Now, it's very serviceable for finite beings and human beings. It works well. But me being on the level I am, I cannot visualize it. I can only see it if what? One of the controllers allows me to see it, right? So that has to do with what? This, reality, doesn't it?
And different levels.
Your frequency.
And your frequency, yeah, your different levels of reality, right? Now, interesting point I made that a couple people not heard of on the meeting is earned space. When we leave here, we leave as finite beings, don't we? And that space we've already earned. Now, as we go up through the Morancha levels, we get retuned, don't we? So we get to see more and more and more and more. We also get to recognize higher and higher and higher beings, right? Now, some of these beings that revealed this book were born on high levels, weren't they? They were created at very high levels. So they cannot see finite beings, many of them. They have to be, the controllers have to allow them to see you. Now, works the opposite way too. For us to see them, our eyes has to be adjusted so we can see them, right? So it works both ways, with the exception of what? We start at the finite and work our way up. Any level that you've learned, you can always relate back to. right?
You've earned.
That you've earned, right? The beings on that level. Not necessarily the space, but the beings on that level for sure. So you'll always recognize what? Finite beings, won't you? As you go up the scale. Why would that be? Because that's earned space for you, right? An earned level of what? Reality. Okay? Now, the higher beings do not have that right. Why? Because
They didn't earn it.
They didn't earn it. They didn't come from this space. So that's where the descending sons of God have to do what? They have to earn their right to recognize us. You see that? We're ascending sons, so we have to earn our right to recognize them.
So it's both exciting for both.
So it works.
descending and ascending.
That's right. It works both directions. I think this might be Roy coming.
Oh my gosh, it is.
Is that Roy? No, I don't believe it is. I think it's the next door neighbor.
Wow.
Okay. So I wanted to mention that
That was
before we
weird.
switch off this. Okay. Would you take the next one? Dude?
Undeified reality ranges from the energy domains of the non-personal to the reality realms of the non-personalizable values of universal existence, even to the presence of the unqualified absolute.
Okay, now what are we talking about here? Undeified reality changing in any domain, in energy domains. When you're talking about the presence of the unqualified absolute, you're talking about space levels that don't even have planets yet, right? We're talking about primordial matter, right? These are undeified reality, aren't they? Why are they undeified? Because the universal absolute is what? Not a deity. Okay? It's not a deified reality. When does it become a deified reality? When the universal absolute steps in, right? Adds deity to it. It's that part that brings it all together, isn't it? So when you have deity and undeity and you bring them together, at that point it becomes what?
Deified reality.
Deified reality, right? Okay? Would you take it from there?
Deified reality embraces all infinite deity potentials ranging upward through all realms of personality, from the lowest finite to the highest infinite, thus encompassing the domain of all that which is personalizable and more, even to the presence of the deity absolute.
Okay, so that's the deified reality, right? That includes who? Us, doesn't it? Because we are a deified reality, are we not? We have deity that controls us, right? Celestial forces that are working constantly to keep things working properly, right? What is our number one deity that controls us? Well, how about the Creator, Son, and the local universe Mother Spirit, right? They're our deified reality. They are controllers of this local universe. And they do that through the presence of the Father, right? They do it through the presence of what? The 7 creators, right? All right. So let's keep going on this. Got one more down here they want to talk to us about. Let me. All right, that's the deified. I went through that without even switching slides, didn't I? Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes, number 3. Interassociated reality. Universe reality is supposedly either deified or undeified. But to some deified beings, there exists a vast domain of interassociated reality, potential, and actualizing, which is difficult of identification. Much of this coordinate reality is embraced within the realms of the universal absolute.
What? There's another level we didn't know about? All right, so suddenly they bring this into us. Interassociated reality. This is the domain of the universal absolute. It's not deified yet, right? And it's not undeified totally. It's somewhere in between the two. Okay?
So that's us.
Huh?
All that's the action that occurs, all the...
It's the, that's the,
I mean, in my view, I see the undeified reality as the, how do you call that, the modeling things that children play with.
Yeah, it's like the clay.
The molten
Yeah.
clay, right? It's kind of static. It's there. I mean, you can
Yeah.
create, but you can add more. But that's the environment, the framework, right?
Yeah.
Then the deity is all the patterns and all this, about all that reflection of action, the source of person and spirits and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then you mix them together. Here we are, and we move our arms and shake things around, and that's all that happens in there, right?
That's right. That's that interassociated reality, isn't it? It's the in-between state. It's that glue, right? The universal absolute. You know, we were talking about how do you understand the universal absolute. It's kind of vague. Well, that's what it is. It brings this and this together. It's kind of stuck in between here, isn't it? If you think about it, somewhere.
Like another particular example would be, for example, at work, or it works with friends, it works with what we are doing here, it works with family, it works with
Yeah.
everything. But when you are working and you say, okay, we have a goal, we do something. When you do something, there is the undeified reality that comes out of it. You know, you have accomplished a project, you have made a car, you have
Yeah.
whatever you have done, right?
The
The
stuff,
painting,
right,
the
yeah.
stuff that comes out of it,
Yeah.
right? But there is the deified part, which is all that spiritual experience, like we talked about. When you engage with your fellow into the process, you do the will of God. As you do the will of God through the process in intelligent interassociation with your fellows,
Uh-huh.
well, this is where the soul comes in. This is where things are being added on the deified level, right?
That's
Or
right.
the experiential level. And I think what we're talking about in level 3 is these interassociations that makes that happen, right?
Wouldn't you say that's the experience part too? That's part of the experiential part?
Yes,
It is.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, you think about it.
Yeah.
You know, so wouldn't you think that as this happens in the outer space levels, don't you think the supreme and the almighty supreme would eventually come into part of this? Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah.
You know, which adds to what? The universal absolute. You see that connection to the universal absolute, don't you? You need the experience to have this, right? So when you think about the universal absolute, and the part of that is what? The experience of the supreme. You see how they're all interrelated? Okay? So let's keep going here. We're still got a little time. All right. What did I do here? I skipped over something here.
Oh, that's the right one. This is the
That's right.
primal.
The
That's
if-
right.
This is the problem. Yeah, I'm on the wrong one here. Ooh, boy, I really skipped over something.
It's down there at the bottom, Roger.
Yeah, I can't find it on mine.
Oh, okay.
On 4, 5. I had the wrong button here. Okay. You want to take it, Linda?
This is the primal concept of original reality. The Father initiates and maintains reality. The primal differentials of reality are the deified and the undeified, the deity absolute and the unqualified absolute. The primal relationship is the tension between them. This Father-initiated divinity tension is perfectly resolved by and eternalizes as the universal absolute.
Does that make sense to y'all now?
Yes,
See,
it does.
you know, you kind of break it down and it all comes together. It's the glue, isn't it? That keeps it all together.
So can we view the universal absolute as the father of all the experience, so the father of the supreme and the ultimate and
All of them.
all
Yeah.
of them?
Yeah. It brings everything together. It's like the universal absolute goes out here and takes the undeified absolute, right? And the deified absolute and brings them together like Superman, right? That's part of the universe. It brings the undeified part of the universe into the deified part of the universe. And what does that? Experience, right? Who's the experience? The Supreme, the Creator Sons, the Creator Daughters. When they send Creator Sons and Daughters out into the outer space levels, what do? They're part of this that brings it together, don't they? All the parts, right? They're necessary. You can't have a universe without what? Creator Sons and Daughters. You can't have a universe without what? 7 Master Spirits. You can't have a universe without what? Ancients of Days. And you sure can't have a universe without one thing, and that's the Supreme, right? Now the other three parts of God the sevenfold are what? The Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Populates everything, doesn't it? Gives you personality, gives you mind, gives you spirit, gives you material matter, doesn't it? Okay? So it makes perfect sense once you start breaking it down like this and thinking about it, doesn't it? Okay, let's keep going. This is one little thing. Pam, you want to take this one and the next one? Because you don't get away with just one thing.
From the viewpoint of time and space, reality is further divisible as
Go ahead and take the next one.
actual and potential realities existing in fullness of expression in contrast to those which carry undisclosed capacity of growth. The eternal Son is an absolute spiritual actuality. Mortal man is very largely an unrealized spiritual potentiality.
Do you understand the difference between actual and potential now? Right? Actual is that which is, potential is that which is coming. Okay? The eternal Son is the absolute spiritual actuality, right? Can't go no further. Mortal man is what? We're like that unqualified absolute, aren't we? You think about it. We're out there ready to start. And it's the Spirit of the Son that brings this unrealized spiritual potential in, doesn't it? So the Son's spirit circuit does what? It works like the universal absolute to draw our spirit into himself, doesn't he? Okay?
Turn
Actual,
potential into
potential.
actual.
Take that's right, potential to the actual. That's right. We're potential. How do we become actual? We fuse with our adjusters, right? So we're co-creators. That's right.
But even there, isn't it true to say that still a lot of things is potential even after we fused?
Oh yeah,
We
many things.
We may have sanctioned our personality reality, but there's still so much to accomplish together.
Just like the super universe, isn't it? When the super universe settles in light and life, God the Father has taken a potential in the 7 super universes and created what? An actual. What happens in the outer space levels? We start with the potential again, and eventually that will be an actual. What happens when that was done? We'll probably go on and on and on and on, right? We're just like the 7 super universes. You think about it. You know, we continue to keep taking these potentials and turning them into actuals. Now let's go to the next step here. We've got a couple more minutes. You want to take the next one, Jim?
Absolute and subabsolute. Absolute realities are eternity existences. Subabsolute realities are projected on 2 levels. Absolunites, realities which are relative with respect to both time and eternity. Finites, reality which are projected in space and are actualized in time.
Okay, so we know what an absolute is, right? Unchanging, okay? And the sub-absolutes are what? They are the absonite and finite beings, aren't they? We are the sub-absolutes, if you think about it, okay? On the absonites level, it is relative to both time and eternity, right? So they're somewhere in between there. You can't put a finger on it. But a finite reality, we're projected on time and space, aren't we? That makes sense? So us as sub-absolutes are a little bit lower level sub-absolute than what? The absonite, right? Okay. Let's keep going.
Existential and experiential. Paradise deity is existential, but the emerging supreme and ultimate are experiential.
Now, does that make sense to y'all now? So, existential are just the only things that existential are the 3 what? Paradise deities. God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. But all other paradise deity is experiential just like we are. And we are part of adding to that experience. So, what does that make us? Co-creators, doesn't it? With the Father. This Father fragment. Okay, let me see where we are Okay, let's keep going one more here. We got a couple more minutes. Don, you want to take the last one?
4. Personal and impersonal. Deity expansion, personality expression, and universe evolution are forever conditioned by the Father's free will act, which forever separated the mind and spirit personal meanings and values of actuality and potentiality centering in the eternal Son from those things which center and inhere in the eternal isle of paradise.
Okay, so we know there's two different types of beings, don't we? We know there's personal beings and we know there's impersonal beings, right? And we have to do with the personal type. We're given a personality. Many types of beings are given a personality. But there are those meaning values, there are those type of beings that are created for one specific purpose or a job, things like that throughout the universe. And for them, personality is not necessary, is it? Because they do repetitive tasks over and over and over and over again. And that's how God keeps them happy, doesn't it? If He had personality, would they be happy doing the same thing over and over and over again? Probably not. They'd rebel. That's right. So that's why there's two different types of beings, right? Makes perfect sense. And we're going to quit here and we'll take up the next
Hey, Roger, I've got
slide.
a question there.
Yeah, go right ahead.
On number 3, deity is existential, but emergent, supreme, and ultimate are experiential.
Right.
If we go back to the first paragraph that we read today, I don't know what number it is there, but the last sentence says, while increasingly experiential deity is being actualized on the divinity levels of supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness.
Right.
This one just says supreme and ultimate, and for some reason it left out absoluteness.
That's because
What's the difference?
That's because the absolute does not require experience, does it? What is the absolute? The absolute is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, right? They don't require this experience. Only beings created under them do, and that's why. That's why these other deities are experiential deities and non-absolutes, right?
So
They will become absolutes from the experience.
But the sentence on the first paragraph there says, increasingly experiential deity is being actualized in supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness.
Right.
As if absoluteness is experiential deity as well.
Well, no, it's part of the, well, yeah, it is in a sense, but it's part of the way they become closer and closer to absolute is through the experiences of the sub-absolute deities. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Sort of? In other words, part of these other deities have to have the Supreme and the Almighty Supreme involved for them to come into full fruition. That's what they're talking about. It becomes part of them. I hope that makes sense to you. That's the way it
I
works.
think there's more to it than that.
Oh, sure, there's always more to it. Listen, it's been a great meeting. Let's say a little closing prayer, and we'll break up for our lunch real quick here. Sweetie, would you say a prayer loudly?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to learn and grow. We thank you for the wisdom that's been shared, and the knowledge and the depth of understanding of your words. And we're so grateful in our hearts and our minds. And we thank you for this opportunity. It is in the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord, we pray. Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming. Hit the recording here.
You need to turn on the